These are 3 discs that every beginner disc golfer should bag. This list is going to exclude putting putters. For most people, it goes without saying that you should pick up a putter. I would recommend just going to your local store if you have one, pick out what feels good in your hand and run with it. And then from there, you can maybe adjust. And so putting and putters are something that kind of come along with time naturally, so they're not going to be included on this list. So the first actual disc we're going to have on the list is some sort of Understable mid-range. For me, this disc is going to be the Gesture Discs Peace Train. It's something that I bag, but really I would recommend any mid-range that has at least a -2 turn. And for those of you who are very new beginners out there, all disc golf discs have flight numbers. The numbers represent speed, glide, turn, and fade. Having a negative number on the turn means that if you're throwing with your right hand like this, it's going to want to turn to the right. And then the last number, fade, means it's going to want to fade back. The number on the Gesture Discs Peace Train is 5-4, so 5 speed, 4 glide, -2 turn, and then 1 fade, meaning it's not gonna totally turn to the right the whole time. It'll come back a little bit at the end. There's a few reasons why I would recommend this as a disc that every beginner should bag. And I know some people are thinking, why not just a really understable putter? I think mid-range specifically because it's something that is going to stay in your bag as you figure it out. This is still a disc that I bag as a more intermediate disc golfer, and even all the way up until you're an advanced amateur. This disc is going to stay with you, and it's going to teach you some very, very important lessons. The mid-range slot is the perfect slot to teach you how to throw angles on the disc. We're talking hyzer, which means pointed away from you towards the ground, and hyzer, pointed away from you up into the air, throwing it flat. With a mid-range that has -2 turn, each one of these different angles is going to do a very different thing for you. And I also like a mid-range specifically because it is going to give you some distance. Even as a beginner, throwing it on hyzer, this angle, and not really knowing what you're doing, it's gonna go a little bit farther than a putter, and it's just gonna feel good. And I don't want to discourage disc golfers from playing the sport because I tell them you can only throw putters for a while until you really figure it out. Don't touch mid-ranges, don't touch drivers. In part, there is wisdom to that because you want to figure out your form with a putter. We always say if you can throw a putter on a hole, you should, because they're the most controllable. But also I've seen people turn away from the sport because it's just not as fun. And I think a mid-range is a great excuse to learn angles and to have a disc in your bag that you're going to be able to have in there for a very long time. And the 5 speed, I just think is a perfect speed to begin to learn how to throw these, what we call hyzer flip shots, which are super important for getting max distance. You want to get an entire full flight out of it. And a full flight is that S shape, is what a lot of beginners will call it. It's just getting that S flight. It starts out going this way, flips up, turns this way, comes back, and it makes the shape of an S in the air. This disc is gonna get you there, and pretty much any mid-range that's a 5-5, -2-1, 5-4, -2-1, somewhere in there, every beginner should be bagging one of these. Before I get to the number 2 disc that every beginner disc golfer should bag, if you are new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. We put out new videos every single week here on Swanky Disc Golf. You can also hit the join button down below for just 99 cents. You get an exclusive video every month, an exclusive giveaway every month, and it's a way to help us keep doing what we're doing. You can also follow us on all of our social medias, and we have a podcast. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, we have the Swanky Disc Golf Show. But anyways, number 2, this might surprise anyone who's watching the video as not a beginner. If you're not really a beginner, you're just here for some advice, I'm going with an Overstable approach disc. That is a very broad term, especially if you're very, very new to disc golf. When we say overstable, it's the opposite of what I said before with the flight numbers. It will usually have a 0 on the 3rd number, the turn number, meaning it's not gonna want to go to the right at all if you're throwing it on a right hand, backhand. Not gonna wanna go to the right at all, and it's gonna have a higher fade number. So instead of 1, it might have 3 or 4 or something like that. I go with the zone in the slot for so many reasons, and I'm gonna get into why it's good for beginners. But the zone specifically, I like now more than ever because now there's more options than ever before. I've always loved the zone for its relatively seamless hand feel. It's not too deep, it's not too shallow. There's no frills, it's just a nice disc that you know if you throw it, it's gonna dump into the ground. As a beginner, you might be saying, why would you want that? The reason is that there is not a higher percentage shot in the game of disc golf than an overstable approach shot. The easiest shot in disc golf should technically be a sort of approach shot to the basket with an overstable disc such as this. It's going to do the same exact thing every single time. If there's a little bit of headwind, it's still going to do the same thing. And there are so many discs in this range now. The Innova Pig is a very popular one. The Toro from Innova. We have the Discmania Drop that just came out. Used to be the Tactic was really good. I think they're discontinuing that, RIP. You have the Yarn from Clash Discs. You have the Savior from Latitude 64. You have the Entropy and now the Tempo from Axiom. Every single company has a disc like this, and the reason is because every single disc golfer bags one. I recommend the Zone, again, because it's just really seamless. They're everywhere. You can get them for relatively cheap if you just get a stock Z1. And now there's also all of these crazy options. This is a Zone GT, standing for Grip Track. You can see it's got this weird grip track in the middle, this weird thing on the bottom. I don't like it, but somebody out there is gonna pick this up and be like, wow, it's a Zone, but I actually like the hand feel. Those people are weird, but that's okay. And hear me out, this is good for beginners because it is the highest percentage disc golf shot in the game. And I firmly believe that the earlier you learn this and the earlier you learn how to utilize these discs, the better you will become at disc golf quicker. And I have seen this in practice. I have given a Zone to somebody who is maybe their third time playing disc golf, and it's the first disc that they're getting that isn't turning over to the right because everybody has recommended them really understable discs. I see them saying, man, I'm only 150 feet away from the basket, but everybody's been recommending me this understable putter, and I'm just not confident it's gonna do exactly what I want it to do. This thing will do what you want it to do every single time. It's really cool. And this is probably the only time on this channel that I'm ever going to do this. In certain cases, as a beginner, you might find an overstable approach disc that isn't quite as high of a speed. So instead of a 4-speed, which the Zone is, maybe you reach to a 3-speed, maybe something like the Envy, which in certain plastics is a 3-speed with 0-2 stability, meaning slightly overstable. You could also reach to something like the Berg. The Berg can low-key be a very good beginner overstable approach disc. And I say that hoping that you will graduate from the Berg to a Zone someday. Okay, the final disc that I believe every beginner should bag is going to be less of a surprise, I feel like. I'm going to recommend the MVP Glitch. That is to say, also any 1-speed with really high glide. I also really like the Discmania Spore. The Spore from Discmania is very similar, could easily be up there. The reason here is obvious, is that this is just the prime example of a very first disc that you would ever pick up. It flies a lot like an ultimate frisbee. It's a 1-speed, meaning it's gonna fly exactly how it's meant to fly, basically no matter how hard you throw it. It's gonna fly really, really straight. It's gonna wanna stay in the air for a long time. It's also a multi-use disc. You can putt with this if you really want to. You can play catch with it. You can do whatever you want with this disc. It is extremely versatile, and we wanna get the most bang for our buck for beginners. And it's also great to learn with. It's going to teach you how to throw on different angles. This one's kind of warped. It's going to teach you also probably the most important shot in disc golf, which is throwing a disc straight. It is one of the hardest and most important throws in especially amateur disc golf. It's just being able to throw a 200-foot tunnel shot. That sounds super easy, and for the pros it really is, but for people starting out, it is way easier to just throw a hyzer that goes around and comes back. Throwing straight is so hard, and this is a great disc to teach you how to do that. And again, you get so much mileage out of it, you get so much value out of it. The Glitch really is a cool disc, and pretty much every company now is starting to emulate it and create their own version of a Glitch because it is such a popular beginner disc. And also it's something that can stay in your bag for as long as you have a disc golf career. Obviously, Simon Lizotte, people like that, still throw the Glitch because it's super useful. So that's number one. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for new videos every single week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Stay swanky.